Jill here with Sirius Dallas Moon, Soul Hour. And Sun is in the 8th house, Mars 29 degrees Pisces. So, Mars is about to inverse to Aries. And Mercury is 22 in ruling midheaven and ascendant. Moon applying to oppose Jupiter. Ralph aloud. Well, a little bit of energy reading. Something, how should I say that? I feel like the reality of energetics in the material world is becoming more evident with Neptune in Aries. And the factor of sovereignty as a prerequisite to energy flow, meaning zero rape, zero slavery, zero energy siphoning, also in occultism, is going to become evident because I think about engineering. And when we think about engineering, there is only so much I can put on, let's say, a bridge before it breaks down. Violating the sovereignty of the constituents is creating a hidden fracture that would be very difficult for, let's say, scientists to diagnose. But that fracture doesn't work in favor of those who violated the sovereignty. When people say, I'll take it, Mars is also a sexual sign. So when people say, oh, the best sex is with love, whether they are demisexual or not, they say, oh, of course, with love is with the best sex. What I'm not saying what they mean, but they spot a certain truth where something's misaligned is not any way gonna be as good as before, during, and after as when something is aligned. Now, we can't have love without sovereignty, and we can't have love in a rapey situation, in an energy siphoning situation, or in a sovereignty violating situation. Magic, occult, is an act of love rather than an act of violence if it seeks to create. And one doesn't even need to, how should I say, to call upon destruction is to violate, how should I say, if somebody violates sovereignty is as if they called upon destruction. I'm going to begin now with Sol in Aries, the first 12 signs of astrology as I envision them in a world of zero rape, zero slavery, zero energy siphoning that is not utopia, but the real world. What do I mean, the real world? The real world is the world that is not, how should I say that? In intelligence, if they rape people, they will have information coming around, but that information will not be of cohesive truth. I stressed that in the previous video. And the real world, or I'll speak from my point of view. upon facing, let's say, trauma, I asked myself, how do I see the world when I have because Aries is my second house, from perspective of love that is actually loving. When I embody love that is actually loving, and am loved in a way that is love that is actually loving. Why was that important? So that I would not be biased as to what I'm looking at. Now let's begin to envision Aries. Aries is the I am, the head of the baby. The orgasmic gushing into the world and into existence. It's an alchemy of being born into cohesion with the self. Love is no longer secret. It's an embarking. And when I think about the innovation in Aries, I think about this is a place of exaltation of the sun, which is the heart and is the I am. So the aligned heart and the I am are basically a spark of passion that have a telos. Just like conception was a spark of passion that had a telos that created conception. The birthing and the forming is that embodiment of that telos, not like a fractal, but also kind of like a fractal. Like a fractal from the body of consciousness that is the exalted soul of the I am. There's the love that is actually loving. How would babies be born when they're born that way? I don't know. Taurus. Now, Aries will be the cardinal, meaning that our authentic creation impulse is going to be aligned. And that's the spark of both success, the idea the idea where we dream with action. Think about an artist that has a canvas before it and has an idea, and then it grabs the pen, it grabs much like passionate lovers take off the clothes. That because that's creation. Taurus. Taurus is settling into being. If I have an idea in Aries, let's say I want to paint the sun. So I scratch the nylon that covers the canvas. Where is the yellow? Where is the yellow? Where is the? Wait a second. Here's silver. Silver and yellow. It's the sun and the moon. Of course. Of course, I cannot paint the sun without the moon. And Taurus is where that spark becomes. We set the cornerstone. We took the action. We ripped off the band-aid. And now we lay the foundation and begin to embellish the painting into texture. Now my idea has a physical incarnation. And then I begin to sense the formation of the shape of existence as something that is within and outside. This would be the rested baby sleeping after labor. The rested paint on the canvas catching the rays of the sun from the canvas. Now the sun is, and the sun that it is on the canvas, albeit just being forming, just being refined, is already catching the light. And even though I could paint light, it's catching the light that's coming from outside onto the canvas. And now there is another dimension forming. It's the beginning of formations of connections between me and the world. The texture, the sensual experience of creation is where something already is. If Aries is an act of doing, this doing is Aries is a doing me. In Taurus, I am. After I said I am, then what is that I am? Is being. Is presence. Not that idea is present, and not only that idea is present, is connecting with the rays of the sun that meet the color and the paint, and then I begin to conceptualize and we move into Gemini. What do I mean by conceptualize? Because Gemini, if Taurus is the pre-linguistic, the senses, the taste, the sensual, the relaxed arousal, Gemini is already beginning to refine things, is where I can begin to conceptualize what is and try to understand what is it that I've created. Because I thought I'm going to paint the sun. But then the sun is here, and then that sun has a connection with something outside, is the rays of the sun. And now I begin to conceptualize, I begin to, in a very fun way, break it apart into constituents. The light rays meet the painting, and they are a part of the connection that creates me being able to see what I've created, that is the sun. Wait, but should I paint the rays of light as they are, or would they look different? Or should I leave it to be communicating? Should that piece be in a museum in the same angle? As Gemini, it's already the engineering. How will I present something? How do I deliver the message? Should I glaze my painting? Should I add another layer? Okay, that's the refinement. And in the beginning, we play with options. Wait, maybe I should duplicate that and have one layer here, two layers here, and I'll have already a musical composition that begins to have a tempo. And that's Mercury. It's the computational facet of creation, editing, refining. 444. Of course, number synchronicity. And I have Gemini fourth house. It's his foundation. When the world is zero rape, zero slavery, zero energy siphoning, the embodied I am becomes a sensual, a relaxed sensual experience. When I say sensual, I don't necessarily mean sexual, but embodied in the senses. And as I try to, as I move to Gemini, I try to break it into the constituents of the way in which I wish to present the sensory sensual experience. And I'm beginning to become aware of the nervous system. How is the listener listening to what I have to say? Something Gemini is totally unaware of. Gemini has no filters, the first sign of speech. And when it's zero rape, zero um, slavery, zero energy siphoning, that speech flows freely. And then I find out that um, that let's say time has a before and after in some language, but then that before and after is switched. It has a telos, it has a direction in some languages, and in some languages it doesn't. And I'm just curious. In my first linguistics story, my first linguistics class was basically me sitting next to. I came out a little bit late. There was a girl next to me, and she saw my awkwardness. She said, come, sit next to me." And I take out basically a board and I begin to paint spheres. While the teacher is speaking about the temporal, the language, linguistics, and the temporal, and how people may perceive something like the concept of time in different languages. Okay, the curiosity of Gemini. Why would anybody study linguistics over nothing? Why not? The mistakes that people make in my mother tongue when they speak another language and think with that language and try to speak in my language are just so fascinating. I have to understand what's happening there. That's Gemini. And by the way, that was my first raw return. I was curious about the linguistic mistakes people make. I didn't know how to name it as linguistics. Cancer. In Cancer, I find out that words can evoke emotions. And the connection between the spoken and the felt, the message and what is received, the ability to absorb images, messages, sounds, ideas, and sense them not in the five senses like Taurus, but emotionally. I like this particular tune because I feel melody in me. It's a very creative cardinal water. And the emotions have residue, they have memory. And an image can spark a memory that can spark emotion. It is where ideas come to form, or when something is created from the emotional into the visible. This is where care fosters creativity. And then we go to the next sign, which is Leo. If in Cancer I form a secure attachment that brings creation, that brings creativity, I'm in secure attachment, I'm free to create. Just think about the situation of artists in the pre-zero rape, zero energy siphoning, zero slavery world, where secure attachment fosters our creativity and we are free to create, or secure attachment meaning we are free to create. In Leo, that creation becomes visible. In Leo is already when I show. If in Aries I was, you know, tearing the wrapping from the canvas, painting the cornerstone. In Taurus, there's a real linguistic connection that can be sensed, but I can't still find the words. In Gemini, I begin to experiment with the refined details, and in Cancer, I begin to form the emotional connection, or not form, but discover that I have created a relation. Where in Leo, I present my art. Now, I am Sun exalts in Aries. I am the painter, let's say, or I am the artist. And my art is also an I am, which is not me and not me. Now there is a lot of vulnerability in that stance. Now that the sun is out, it is visible if it whether it's in a museum or a show. There is a certain sort of inspiration that it captures, and then there is a certain sort of light that I emit, or or me glowing, that inspires. There's something very vulnerable about that position. It's kind of like everything is out. That moment where I was tearing the wrap from the painting, this cornerstone, this refine, all these thoughts that I have, all these experience that I have, all these dreams that I had, the ways, the conversations, the things that, and it's all out there. It's like, can they see it? Because it's like, is it too much, or what if they can see it? Like the sense, if like I sense it, it's when we are in the place of the sun, we don't really know what is, you know think about think about think about somebody that is in love. They're in love and they're glowing, and sometimes everybody can see that, but they're like, they're not really sure, like so there's this vulnerability about the heart is very visible. It is also where we can begin to connect with other hearts. Well, my father was um, loved to take pictures. My mom loved to paint. I also paint. There is this heritage. Just think about a world where people don't have to be raped in front of cameras to have um, access to networking and selling their art, let's say. Okay, just Virgo. Virgo is very interesting because there's such sensitivity to frequency in Virgo. But in a world with zero rape, zero slavery, zero energy siphoning, would Virgo really be so judgmental? It's an open ended question. Because what we perceive with Virgo is the tones that we couldn't really name in Taurus and Gemini. is the details of, wait a second, if I paint if I paint something with this shade as a basis, there would be a little more temperature, but in a way it's way more accurate than the playful Gemini. In Virgo, there are 170 shades of green. And the technique to reach them with the simplest paint that you can buy $1 at the corner store, but also the most luxurious imported from I don't know where paint that has this particular edited and knowing what actually translates to quality and what was just a fun experience of trying something new. Virgo is also where um, if if in Taurus, hey, I like this drink, in Gemini, oh, there are a couple of types of tea or coffee. In Cancer, I feel emotionally different with each one of them. In Leo, oh, that tea is good for the heart. That tea is good for, I don't know. And the connection between the colors, because Sun is also the colors. Both Mercury and the Sun are colors. Mercury for the distinction between colors, and Sun for the visibility of the different colors. In Mercury, hey, this is white, it's not black. But then if I take this shade of gray and this shade of gray and I put them together, it also looks like it's white and not black. With the Sun, it is the light that becomes, is almost alchemized upon an encounter or an alchemy of, the lights the light. I don't know how it took so long to discover like the photoelectric, because the light have a telos that meet the canvas and it's like an explosion, and that has a certain rate, and that becomes what we see, which is a color. And one can almost sense that. So now that I think about it, I don't know why it took. Probably because people were raped, they took so long to understand that this wavy thing becomes tangible, like conception, when the light meets something, and then we can see it. There is no other scientific reason it took so long to discover the workings of light. And in Virgo, we think those thoughts. We also put them to words. In Virgo, we have an autobiography. We are already important enough for somebody to want to help us write it. What about the move from Virgo to Libra? I talked about Venus and Mercury. And Libra is a very interesting sign that I totally understand how Venus and Mercury were mistaken when we think about Libra, because Libra is a Venus air sign. It's Venus, but with Mercury. If we had to make something that is either something or something else but with Venus, we do that in Libra. Is it a boy or a girl? But wait a second, can we, like, is checking the genitals enough to know if it's a boy or a girl? What if somebody is born with these genitals but they're like a girl? How do we know it's not speaking yet? When does it know? I have Libra 8 house, I'm a bit biased with the example. How much do we charge for a painting? Can we quantify the sun? Absolutely not. But then perhaps we could. Should we? I don't think so. But maybe it's actually assisting us to make some order in the cryptic chaos of existence. It's the unifying of the mercurial aspects. If I think about my artwork, it's not just the sum of how much the paint cost and how much the canvas cost and how much I spent time working, but it also cannot forget those either. And yet there are things that we can't trade. There is a natural thing where if my child asks me to cook their favorite pie and I have limited energy, I can say, okay, but could you buy apples and could you buy sour cream? I can't say that it's not a form of exchange, but it's not like we traded something. I just have limited resources of energy that I'd like to put into creation. Now, the interesting part, what would Scorpio be like? And the first thing that I think about is the water of the well being clear. What all the things we think about Scorpio? Zero rape, zero slavery, zero energy siphoning. What is Scorpio? The water of the well is clear, so there's nothing actually frightening out there or down there. Can we even think about Scorpio? The water of the well is clear. Do I even need to dig a well? Because it's fertile all around. I can collect water from rainwater. It might be exciting to dig as we dig into the foundation of the house, although the weather is kind of not really requiring that much digging deep. So what do we say about Scorpio? We think about Scorpio as transmuting something. It can be autumn's leaves composting, nourishing the soil, and but it's also, but then what do we say about evergreen trees? Would we have more evergreen trees or trees that shed their leaves in a world where the water of the well is clear? I don't know. But in Sagittarius, what would be the place of religion or philosophy in our lives in such a world? What would we believe in? We wouldn't need to sacrifice to any god. We may benevolently share with the gods. Jupiter also rules trees, and Jupiter rules something big. So think about big trees that can actually become residents. Although that would be the engineering pole of Gemini. Would we need to cut trees? Would the weather be such that we would need to cut trees? Because Jupiter is trees, but it's also a fire sign, and it can be the fire that we make in the winter from tree logs. But something tells me that we might have a very different type of weather. I remember when I was trying to order a talisman from um, the antlers of a reindeer, and then it was Norwegian time, so the order was canceled before it could ship. But um, what I received was almost like the antler showing the antler through the antler, the reindeer showing me the how his antlers were like the trunks of the bushes from where it used to eat, and how fertile the Arctic land is. It was showing me how fertile the Arctic is that we are used to see as snow. And I felt so deeply loved. It's one of the deepest and most profound experience I had. It's obviously not how we know the Arctic now. Capricorn. Capricorn we think about is tall structures or the top of the mountain. Capricorn is also a place of pilgrimage, and yet it can simply be the curiosity that sustains climbing a mountain in a way, shape, or form. A dedication to create something tangible that stands the test of time in the world. We now used to think about Capricorn as sustaining heart conditions, and I think about the compression of the bones, and we think about the opposite sign, Cancer, where swimming is such a good practice for basically bone density. And to swim, we also need to know the nature around us. If you think about swimming in something that's not a pool, also in a pool, depending on the location. So it does require some sort of risk management. Our teeth would probably looking way better. Would probably be looking way better. Would probably be way healthier. Aquarius. Aquarius is the curiosity with structures. Even Gemini would think about camping in a tent and setting the tent. It's the child that builds a tent inside their room and sits in it with the cat or something. So in Aquarius, we do that, but with stone, in the architecture that plays with light to create a statue or a structure that something can reside in. And there's something of a community in Aquarius. In fact, the very art of conceiving the world without rape, slavery, and energy siphoning, and what would the astrology be, is an Aquarian art. It's actually not utopia, but the real world. Because if everything that is founded on trauma is a coping mechanism, then as we curate from trauma, we unravel the real world. And that's the essence. It's not the essence of scientific discovery, because there is a natural sense of discovery that doesn't require trauma to begin with. And if I brought that, even if I brought that very gnosis to the world, then that's my legacy. But in Pisces, I've pondered about the green waters, but I've pondered about what would the ocean look like in a world with zero rape, zero slavery, zero energy siphoning. If shamans and healers could sense the ocean and far away remote lands, and could sense what's happening in those places, on whether the land could sustain it or not, and would use prayer and music and their practices to assist in what they can globally, then what would the world without rape, slavery, and energy siphoning look like? And what would the training of these shamans would look like, if not children and people being naturally attuned? The helplessness that Pisces is associated with might be completely transformed. Because if we have a sense of self that transforms and evolves and creates of a love, then sailing the seas is a natural telos of the evolution of the soul across space and time to be unified into something. If I think about movement and the freedom of movement, but movement, the natural movement, it requires determinism. Okay, if I'm dancing to music, it requires determinism that allows me to dance, to put consciousness into the movement. And yet, is not completely deterministic, otherwise there would be no movement or no halting of a movement. And in Pisces, it's not a paradox, but something that is a natural wonder that we can appreciate following understanding the nervous system in Aquarius. And the wonder at the miracle of movement is both profound, innocent, and wise. We fear not of corrupting the innocent by studying its patterns. Okay, learning how, let's say, learning how a movie is being made, or learning the wonder and the magic behind the technique of how a work of art came to life, doesn't destroy the wonder, but deepens the, the appreciation and the joy. It is the flow of having mastered an art and the mystery of the eternity, because right afterwards there's another idea, and that's Aries. Thank you.